We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the HaltingWinter Podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the HaltingWinter Podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Brenda Eivens, City Manager in Cedar Park, Texas. I have been waiting for this podcast for a long time. So, Brenda, welcome to the podcast. It is definitely a pleasure to have you on today.
Well, I personally have looked forward to this as well. So thanks for having me.
This is going to be so great because usually we walk through the story of, right, the city manager, county administrator, their life from kind of birth up to where they're at today. And then we dive into the city or the county that they're usually leading. Your story and Cedar Park's story are so intercombined because Cedar Park is a young city and yet it's massive now. And it's just the kind of the story of Texas, how Texas has just grown so rapidly, and Austin specifically. Cedar Park is a northwest city right in the, outer ring of it. And so it's going to be fascinating to really walk through both your story and Cedar Park's story. And especially as someone who's been a city manager there for, I think, 21 years in August. That is that's an amazing run in one city. You just don't see that with the typical tenure being 4 to 5 years. And so how cool is that to hear not only your story, but to see what's happened in the life of a city from your vantage point from that unique role. So let's, before we get to the city and the professional realities of your amazing career, take us back to the beginning. Tell us about where you were born and kind of the childhood that shaped you and led you on this journey.
Well, funny enough, I'm one of those rare people in the Austin region who was actually born in Austin. And so I have had the fortune of not only having been born here, but also growing up in this region. And then, after college, coming back and raising my family here as well. Like I said, I was born in Austin. We ended up, our family moved to Georgetown, which is also a suburb area of this region. It's where my dad was born and raised. So he was returning home. It was a small town back then, but also one of the towns you hear about in the Central Texas area related to, growth, quality of life. So a lot of this was, oh gosh, I grew up in this region, which has in a lot of ways given me some, I don't know that I'd say advantage, but certainly I've been able to watch the growth through the years and the various changes that have come along the way. And so I would also say, as it relates to Cedar Park, if you would have asked me as I was, in high school as a Georgetown High School Eagle, I'm like, oh yeah, where do you think you'll find yourself? I probably at that time would not have said Cedar Park, Texas. And it was primarily because it was even more like it was much smaller even than Georgetown at the time. And so to have been sort of a part of this entire journey has been really incredible.
So cool. There's so many things that come to my mind. The first I want to ask you is because, again, you grew up how far is Georgetown from Austin?
Georgetown from Austin is probably about 25 miles. They may say a little shorter, but yeah, when we were growing up, like the standard was, it takes 30 minutes to get to Austin. And it was, there are a lot of things that were similar. You lived in Georgetown, but you worked in Austin. And so even when I first started working in Cedar Park was considered a commuter community, meaning you lived in Cedar Park, but you worked outside of Cedar Park, whether it was in Round Rock, whether it was in Austin.
Okay.
So there were some similarities in that.
Yeah, so Georgetown's close enough that you're going back to Austin. You're probably, as you're growing up, hanging out in Austin once in a while for things.
Yes.
When you look back, because you mentioned this, like, whether it's given you, I would think it would give you an advantage, especially in your role as the city manager. Again, this unique role that has these three dynamics to it, where you've got your staff, and especially as it grows, this is a large organization, multi-departments that you're trying to create vision for as you continue to have a city flourish. But then you have elected, which are their own kind of chaotic, group of people. And then you have the residents. And I think that especially as we get into Cedar Park's story, but Austin's story as well, the growth in these cities is so dynamic. And it's growth not just people having babies that are the same kind of mindset and culture living somewhere. It's this influx from all over the U.S. Austin, I never thought when I was growing up that Austin was like a music artist. I would have never, if I would have guessed, if someone would ask me what are the musical cities, probably Austin. And I was a professional musician. Austin wouldn't have come up on my necessarily top, 5-10 radar. It is definitely among the top now for sure. I think in some ways even rivals Nashville. And so it has changed dramatically in its culture. And I would think that the ability to have been a part of that gives you some empathy to residents who have a hard time with that change, but while also being a futurist who goes, but we have to continue to move forward or else, right? Things only grow or die. And I think that's one of the challenges of city management. When you look back at Austin, what's maybe, does anything stand out as you're like, wow, this has been some wild change?
Well, it's funny that you bring up the whole arts and culture piece, because certainly when I was growing up, I think that really was already part of the culture. I'm like, oh yeah, people talk about 6th Street. But 6th Street was nothing but bands and music. And, even as a teenager, you can't get in anywhere. But what you can do is walk up and down and sort of get exposed to those areas, the festivals they would do. And so I feel like that really was part of growing up in this area, is that exposure. I think there was also a perception of sort of the north side of the river in Austin versus the south side. And again, I grew up in Georgetown. That was a second or third ring suburb at the time. So definitely on the north side. But still, it had this flavor to it that even way back then had this sort of arts and culture piece to it, as well as what I would say, I'd use the word informality as it related to the culture. And maybe it's more like it was a casual culture. And so as you think about other places in Texas and sort of the feel of them, Austin definitely had its own feel. Of course, we all grew up around the university. So that had its own role in the culture that really did sort of spread out into the suburbs as well. And then when I think about today, and I can even relate this to Cedar Park today, and thinking about, there's been a tremendous amount of growth and influx of people from from all over the United States, even a lot of people who have moved out of Austin, like that desire to have some of those quality of life pieces to it, being like music or arts or things like that. We hear more and more even today being in a suburb. And I do attribute a lot of that to, our tie into the Austin area and that Austin culture. I would say, in addition to that piece, the part about Austin always felt like an outdoor community. I mean, Barton Springs was always a big, draw to people, the trails, the sort of this outdoor living piece that even driving to work this morning, I was driving through a neighborhood and it really caught my attention to see the number of people outside walking their dog with a stroller, just sort of the number of people who were engaged at 8:00 in the morning of enjoying that type of environment.
It does seem the friends I've had who have moved from Seattle to Austin feel like it's like they're like, I could never do Dallas or Houston, but Austin has kind of the same vibe. It has that artist, kind of that, if you think about a family, it's kind of like one of those middle kids in a family of like 5 kids that gets kind of lost and kind of does their own artist kind of thing. But it's like that. It's
I have one of those. I own one of those children.
Right, you own one, exactly. Oh, it's so good. Well, when you're growing up inside of this community, did you have any awareness of local gov? Was that on your radar? Any relatives that worked in local gov?
The answer to that is absolutely not. I really did. I didn't. And it really wasn't until I was in grad school. And so my undergraduate degree is in English. I thought I was going to teach at, secondary or beyond. And then I started working in HR, but I worked for the University of Texas at the time. And so it really sort of opened my eyes in a different way. And I thought I really was loving what I was doing. I liked this human resources environment, but I knew I wanted to go back to school and further my education. And, I worked full time. I'd just gotten married, and I ended up while I was still working, I was going to school at Texas State. And I'll admit that at the time, Texas State was still called Southwest Texas, and so that super ages me, just so you know, because they changed to Texas State later on. But at the time, Southwest Texas, i.e., Texas State, had a master's in public administration, and it had a concentration in human resources. And that's really what sort of led me down that path. I think the changes along the way happened was I was exposed to local government through that program at a couple of city managers that were going through the program at the same time I was. One of them was the city manager in San Marcos. And we had a public finance class together, and they had just gotten the outlet malls in San Marcos, which was a really big deal. And so I remember listening to him give this presentation about sales tax, which I know sounds super like nerdy and lame, but it really was like this exposure that I had not had before. And so anyway, we had a couple other classes together. It was really interesting to me to hear him talk about, here's this city manager. I'm very fresh out of, undergrad school. I don't have a lot of experience. And so having somebody in those classes that had had this experience and could talk about all these different, here are all these things that happen in local government. I was like, oh, wow, I have not really been exposed to this. And, once I graduated and there was a job opening at the city of Cedar Park for a human resources manager. And I remember calling this city manager and saying, hey, there's this opportunity in Cedar Park. Like, what do you think? And having him so excited that I had an interest in local government, and then talking through things about, oh, hey, you realize that's a fast growing city. There's going to be a lot of opportunity there. I think that, you should definitely take a strong look at this. And so that really was my first exposure, was really through sort of this academic lens of somebody who was living the practitioner lens, the practitioner life of it.
I love this because just to encourage you, when I ask if, of all these city managers, county administrators, did you have any awareness? It's like 95% of you had no idea. And I think that's why
there's some of it. Yeah.
That's why I'm so passionate about, we got to get in front of young people to say, not only is local gov the impetus of all the modern services that you enjoy and take for granted, but there's opportunity here for real careers of mission and I think of real, there's just so many skill sets needed for local gov, from scientists to water to public works to economic development. I don't know if there's an area of interest and skill we don't find an outlet for in local gov. So how cool is it that I love this story. You're an English major. Yeah. You're thinking about English.
I totally agree with that. And, later in my career as city manager, I actually did spend a few years teaching a class at UT Austin at the LBJ school that was focused in public administration or issues in urban management. And to your point about, gosh, how can you help engage individuals who are interested in some sort of either A, administration, B, public policy, to look at local government. Because if you think about Austin, which is the capital of Texas, you think about Austin proper being like this city that, it's your large city here. So it's services look a little different than in the suburbs. But it was always interesting to me to be in in those classrooms, and people who either A, had actually not thought about local government, and having some opportunities to talk about, oh, if one of your goals is to, I really want to make an impact. I want to be able to make a difference. The things that you hear from students about, why are you in public affairs or public administration? And then being able to talk about, oh yeah, here's how you can translate that sort of internal goal into like real life. And it really does happen, at this local government level. And for me, it was even more than just local government. Because again, we're sitting in the capital of Texas, which is a great city, and how, to our points earlier, it's got all this cool vibe with it, and try to encourage people to look at, don't limit yourself only to the major cities, but really look at what the suburbs and even, the smaller rural areas, like how you can make a difference there. And how you're able to impact people's lives.
So good. Here you are again, English major. You start working. I love this. You start working for the school in HR, and you're like, oh, I kind of like this. Now it's a twist. Now it's like, oh, I want to get a master's degree. What kind? I don't know what an MPA is, but they've got to focus on HR. So you kind of walk into this MPA degree, and all of a sudden there's this connection. Another student who is a city manager that's probably getting their MPA because they want to be able to write. You kind of have to have those three initials if you want to, continue to climb the ladder. And it's from a student. Usually we have the common story is, they'll be in an MPA program, not even because they're going to go into local gov. Maybe it was state or federal interest, but then they had a city manager come in and do teach kind of like what you did. And it was like, oh, what's the city manager? But you had a student. I love this too, to encourage, like, if you are maybe you are in your career and you're listening right now and you're like, gosh, do I go? I'm already a city manager. Do I go back and get my MPA? And there's another opportunity to influence the young people to go, hey, there's this job, there's this role, there's this opportunity. And so all of a sudden the light bulb goes off for you. And tell us then about you graduate from Texas State University with the MPA, and how does Cedar Park come on the radar? Because like you said, Cedar Park, it's not like some huge, booming, I mean, there is growth happening there, obviously, but how did that come on your radar?
Yeah. It came on my radar through another connection, somebody that I worked with in human resources at the university, who he and his partner had just moved. They just bought a home in Cedar Park. And so he, again, we worked together and he was like, hey, I saw this opportunity in Cedar Park and I think you should take a look at it. And so I did. And I thought, gosh, I'm leaving, I would be leaving this organization that at the time probably had about 10,000 non-academic employees. If you think about running a university, it was large. So we had a large human resources staff. And so I'm like, oh, I would be transitioning into an organization that had a total, I think it was like 85 employees at the time. It was like very small. It's less than 100 employees. There is no HR department. There's an HR person. But again, after I make a couple of phone calls, it's like, oh, this is going to be a place that grows. And when you're in a city that is growing, just sort of recognize that there will be other opportunities there as well. And you're getting a different type of experience, because when you're in a large organization, and I think this is true across the board, whether you're in planning, you're in HR, whether you're in, engineering, even, think about city services, or even just large organizations, you get to be an expert in that field, but it's probably in one area. So it's like, and your ability to sort of move and shift is really different. So while I had worked in employment, and so I, had worked on the recruiting side of the space. I had worked in compensation. So I had like sort of the money side of the space. I had worked in employee relations. What I had not done is I had not been in any kind of generalist role. And so, instead of some of the depth, it was more of the breadth of it. And again, sort of this opportunity to go in and help establish a program that didn't exist in the city at the time. And so that was what was interesting to me. And the reason that I ended up looking at that opportunity. People were like, oh, did you get a big pay increase? I'm like, no, not one penny. Like the move was not about that move. And so it was really about sort of the other things that I thought that I would be able to do in a job.
I think many people assume the AI and all of the new technology coming out, it's something reserved for large cities and urban counties with big budgets and dedicated IT teams. That is simply not true. Whether you serve in a rural township, a village, a small town, a city, or a county of any size, AI can help your organization work smarter, improve your resident service, and give your team back valuable time to focus on the work that matters most. Tyler Technologies is helping local governments of every size put practical AI solutions to work, helping make communities more efficient, more resilient, and better prepared for the future. To learn how your organization can begin using AI today in helpful ways, visit tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if you'll be attending the GMIS Meets Conference in Virginia, be sure to stop by the Tyler Technologies booth and join the AI at Work general session held on Monday afternoon to see firsthand how local governments are putting AI to work in practical, meaningful ways. Now, back to the conversation. Yeah, you get to lay the foundation, like you said, of all these kind of areas. And I'm sure your mind was even more blown as you came into the position to be like, wow, now there's union contracts. And I mean, just all the things that local gov that people just have no idea, right? And so let's talk about
100%.
So let's talk about
like
that. I kind of want to mirror Cedar Park and you. So Cedar Park for the national audience, this is I think 16 miles northwest of Austin. And it incorporates in February of 1973 with a population of like 1,765 people. Okay, so 1,765 people. I think I read that the first thing they built after they incorporated it was a library. I bring that up not only because I love libraries, but I bring that up because last year you opened a new $31 million library. And I thought that was so cool.
I don't want to say it was a little more expensive than that, but I think it was a little more expensive.
It was a little more expensive.
It's incredible. It's an incredible community asset.
Well, I want, and when we get to today, I want to dive into that because I love these spaces. Yeah. It's one of the things I love to highlight, and what we're actually going to do with it, what we're calling the Halting Winter Tour, when we tour different places, we want to do these series on, the cities that have great parks or that have cool festivals. I think libraries is one of these that, like, when you use a library because now they are community centers of all kinds of activity. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. So we'll save that to dive into. We'll give the audience a little tease to stick around to the end. But how cool is this? Here it is. Now you come in, just again, so 1973, 1,700 people, 1980, 3,400 people, 1990, 5,200 people. So it's just like this, this little baby city kind of doing its little baby thing. You come in the mid 90s, and I think you had mentioned earlier that now it's 10,000. It had doubled from 55,000 to 10,000. Give us the scope of Cedar Park when you come in as the HR director of this kind of like, here's this city trying to figure out. And I always think that too, just because I've been in a couple organizations that have had radical growth, and HR was always the last thing. They're like, we can just figure it out. And it's like, you can't. Like, we have benefits. We have real employees who need real paychecks on time. Like, I'm sure there was a lot of not only coming in, but a lot of like, oh my gosh, they're so disorganized. Tell us about what it was like when you came in.
I don't know that I would say it was like so disorganized. I think when you are in growth that is happening like double digit, percentages, and it's over and over again, actually what's happening is everybody is running so fast because, when you think about a growth of the city, whatever population growth is happening at the time, it's really not covering the cost of like government and service. So whoever you have, man, they're running fast. They're issuing permits and permits and permits and permits. And like, there's such a big focus on that side of growth is just like, man, can you get permits out the door fast enough? At the same time, you've got like, oh yeah, what's happening in your base public safety. So for Cedar Park in 1994, so right before I got here, they ended up, it had been served by a volunteer fire department. And so right as I'm coming in, they were moving into a paid fire department. So a lot of us sort of came in at the same time. In fact, our current fire chief today started as a firefighter the day before I started as the HR manager. So, talk about folks that have had the opportunity to grow up in the organization, in the community as all those things are happening together. And so there are, levers are being, pulled in a lot of different directions. And again, so I would call it like, I would call it less disorganized and more just like fast, because everything was like, it needed to happen. It needed to happen quickly. And so there was a lot of that, which meant you've got some hiring things that from an HR perspective, it was trying to get programs in place, people hired. How are we going to do this? Working with the other departments, how are you going to pay for things? So there's this period of time where it really is they had a brand new city manager as I was coming in as well. And so it's a lot of transition on top of growth. And so for me personally, what that, ultimately meant was, oh yeah, if you were willing to raise your hand, then yep, I was the HR person. But guess what? If they needed some assistance somewhere else, they'd be like, can you do that? Or you're like, can you fill in the blank? And if you're willing to raise your hand, then you also got some more experience. And so I feel like there was a tremendous amount of on the job learning in areas that were new to me. And so, I I've told students this, I've told interns this. I'm like, oh yeah, when you see opportunity and if you're sort of willing to like stretch, then there's also these opportunities for a tremendous amount of professional growth as well. And so I feel like, and I certainly was not the only one doing that. I feel like the organization was sort of set up that way early on, to where it was like, if you raise your hand, then we're going to help fill in some of these blanks.
Well, it's one of the things about not only growth, but just cities. Like cities are never going, that I've ever seen, it's like you're never going to have enough money, enough staff. Like you're always kind of behind. And like you say, especially with a growing city, I mean, think about that for the audience of maybe non-elect or employees of local gov who might, and even if you're in local gov, sometimes you don't even realize the reality of the mechanism. Because think about the growth, it's not like you're sitting on money and extra firefighters and fire trucks and trash trucks. But it's not like when you have new people come in, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we can wait until, I pay taxes for a few years for you to buy the services that I need. You want them right there. You want your trash. You want a new, trash can, and you want to call the fire and be like, it's there. All those things cost mega money. A trash, truck is like, you're talking like a fire truck. I mean, millions of dollars. And a city's got to, think about this. In 1990, it's 5,000 people. You join mid-90s, it's 10,000. By 2000, it's 26,000 people. And if someone goes, oh yeah, 26, that's, it's still kind of a smaller city. That's 400% growth. The internal weight of that. And like you say, it's not like a city's a sprint. These are marathons. The city's going to outlive all of us. And yet you are asked to sprint. And when you look at, today, 83,000 people, it looks like you guys have been sprinting for a long time. It's just like, that's a special kind of horse down there.
Yeah, we have. So I think one of the things that's a little different about Cedar Park today versus when I came in is sort of the pace of growth. And I'm like, oh, you're not doubling every 10 years or like that's sort of not how our growth looks today. But the early years, that's absolutely. I'm like, oh yeah, at two different points in time, you're the fourth fastest city in America, the fourth fastest growing city in America under 25,000. You're the fourth fastest growing city in America, under 50,000. But we don't live in the, fourth fastest growing. Our growth today, I would say is, and I don't want to say it's over because it's not. It's just that it's not doubling every 10 years in the same way. And so those early years of this very fast growth feel a little different than here's how we're managing growth at this point. And I would also add, coming into local government when I had not been in local government, I think about councils that were there at the time, certainly, the city management that was there at the time, and sort of, you didn't know what you were learning then. It's sort of like the retrospect of, but I'm like, oh man, how fortunate was I to sort of come in at the time that I did. Again, they were in a tremendous amount of transition, but they had this council that, and several of them were new because again, they'd just gone through this, pretty significant annexation, but they had focus on the future in terms of planning. And it's like, oh, we're going to do our first, significant comprehensive plan, and like actually put some of those early foundational things in place during a time of significant growth. And so, like I said, I don't know if people can appreciate like what that actually did for the city back then, but it did give sort of those guidelines to help manage what was very, very fast growth at the time. And so I feel like the city sort of has, built off of that continually, and sort of this appreciation for some of this longer term planning. It's like, oh yeah, you have this longer term plan. Okay, it's time to like relook at what does that longer term plan look like now? Oh yeah, you're double what you were before. Is that like, are we still headed in the right direction? And then sort of off of that, sort of the offshoots of some of the master plans that when I think about today, how important those things have been along, along those 30 years, at least that I've been here to help guide a lot of those decisions.
It's so interesting that you say that because, in fact, the episode that just released today with Mike Van Milligan in Dubuque, Iowa, he's been there for 30 years. And he said that was when he came in, he looked for the comprehensive plan and he discovered they didn't have one. And he's like, we need one. And he said that was those documents. And again, you can't just do it once and then live off of it for 30 years. But you have to have something that gives guidance so that the council, the residents, the staff, everyone has an idea of what are priorities. What are you rowing towards? And what are you updating? And how are you bending with that with growth or new opportunities? And it's so surprising to me still how many cities I run into that don't have that or not use it. They did it because it was a retreat project, but they're not really using it. It's like, that might be why you're not having like the culture of real forward movement and collaboration. Seems like that was really important for you guys.
I think those were like critical. Again, when you are in the middle of like, I'm doubling, double digit growth every year, having some of those very key components in place, like what are you doing with your utilities? How are you going to, are you extending? Are you going to make development extend? How's that going to work? What are the pros? What are the cons? And so, yeah, having some of those early decisions then actually did help impact how growth happened here. And even though we say we're 17 miles from Austin, we're actually not. We're 17 miles from downtown. We abut Austin directly on our northwest border. And so we're actually a first ring suburb. So that growth happens like, oh, I'm crossing, I'm only moving 5 miles. Well, oh, okay. Well, now I'm in Cedar Park. And so a lot of that growth happened as people were looking for, we have a highly rated school district where, they were looking, of course, at home prices and, oh, there was a new building happening out here at the time. And so, so those transitions as they were happening, having those plans in place actually helped some of those early decisions about, are we going to manage this? Are we not going to manage this? Are we going to let growth happen? Are we going to try to figure out places where it makes sense and where the utilities are, or where we want to put utilities. What does that do to our roads? What do we have to build? And so like I said, I think at the time you're like, oh yeah, we're in the middle of studies. Again, in retrospect, I certainly have an appreciation of what was done back then that sort of lets us do what we do now.
I have this unique pleasure, this unique opportunity to meet with thousands of local government leaders from across the nation every year through conferences and workshops and the podcast. Just these interviews, these conversations are just so insightful. And one of the things I have learned about local government leaders is this: the best leaders are lifelong learners, not because they have all the answers. It's because they understand that leadership, that journey of leadership, is never finished. Every challenge, every difficult conversation, every budget season, every organizational change or disruption is another opportunity to grow. That's why this summer we're doing something different inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. We're launching a special summer series called Stories That Shape Leaders. You know that every week I take a best-selling book, usually a business book, and we break down its insights and apply them to local gov. This summer, we're taking biographies, memoirs, timeless leadership books that don't necessarily fall into those typical business, culture, strategy kind of genre. And we're going to explore the lives, the decisions, the failures, challenges, the lessons of leaders who navigated incredible adversity, who had to build trust when hope was fleeting, who inspired others not only to dream, but to take action, and who left a lasting impact. Leadership isn't shaped just through strategies and frameworks alone. It is shaped through stories. Stories that challenge assumptions, stories that expand our perspective, stories that help us become the leaders our communities need us to be. When you join the MLDC, you unlock the entire summer series, but you unlock even more. You unlock the weekly leadership content, the live mastermind sessions, the nationwide community of local government leaders, and all the MLDC resources, not just for the summer, but for the rest of 2026. If you are looking for a place to continue growing this summer while connecting with leaders who understand the unique challenges of local government, I would love to invite you to join us. Learn more at haltingwinter.com/MLDC or simply use the link in the show notes. Now, back to the conversation. Totally. So here you are drinking from the fire hose. It's a totally new, even though it's HR. And again, it's not like you have a ton of experience, coming in. You've been in HR a few years at the school, and now you're getting and you're running at the speed of light, at this city that's got this growth. And I say this because a year after you join, an F3 tornado hits and just devastates downtown. Now you get to not only, we got to figure out as the local government, organization, how do we recover from this? On top of the marathon speed you're already running, people don't realize, we see on the news, you see this fire in LA or you see this flood in Louisiana, and it's the talk of the town for 2-3 days, and then it disappears and we're on to the next story. People don't understand the recovery process, just the recovery process, the rebuilding process. These are years. What was it like to face something like that in the moment as part now of the local, as part of the city, the kind of the professional thing that has to deliver still services, but also has the soul? I think that people don't understand your city, local government protects the soul of that. Like when people hurt, it's trying to figure out, how do we make sure people are cared for? How do we impact? How do we caress this culture? Tell us about what that experience was like.
So to your point, I hadn't been here that long. And so as it was a tornado that hit Cedar Park. It had already hit communities north of us and it was like F5 when it hit those. By the time it hits us, it's actually slightly less intense, but it does. And it goes through, it hits some of our commercial properties and it hits into one of our neighborhoods. But already the region was already like, oh man, there's a lot of damage in not just Cedar Park, but in our region. And so, initially, it's sort of what you think it's going to be. There's a lot of like individual moments with business leaders who are helping, step up and make really important decisions about what's happened in their area. Your managers of the Albertsons grocery store becomes part of our story because it hits a grocery store, which is for us at that time. I mean, you call it its own gathering place, if you will, because it's, you don't have a lot in Cedar Park at that time. So that's an area where people are, and certainly like through the neighborhoods. So immediately you get a good sense of, oh, we don't have an emergency management department. We're not that size. But boy, oh boy, do your public safety people step up like immediately and play such a pivotal role in responding to what has been, what is an emergency and a crisis in our community. And so I think from my lens, watching that, and I would also say, like, next to, our fire personnel being the calmest people in the room, the other person I watched, like, during that day, because we were at City Hall when it hit. So, we were all sheltered. And the second calmest person, or maybe the most, I'm not sure, was the city manager at the time. I mean, it was, there was no panic in the midst of the emergency. It was the calmest, coolest head. And so, I, again, can look back at that experience on who does local government need to be in the moments of crisis. It's like, one, be the calmest person in there, and two, have the plan on how we're going to respond to this. And I feel like those things, that how you were responding, to your point about compassion. It's amazing what happens in a community in terms of the compassion in your community during any time of crisis. I saw it, a tornado in 1997. I saw it absolutely during COVID. We had two hugely significant ice storms that like shut down our region candidly, for several days. And watching people respond, watching your own community respond, your own citizens is, I mean, gosh, talk about fill your heart. Because I feel like from a city perspective, like, you have people prepared. They know what they're going to be doing. Is the water on? What are we doing to the roads? How are we responding to emergencies? Like, you have professionals who absolutely know what they're going to be doing. And even when there are new like issues or challenges that come up, like, you have people in place who are working together to help you like navigate those things. So you have that operational piece. And then I think, like I said, there's this community side that, man, surprises you in the the best kind of fill your heart way on how people will help and help their neighbors, I guess is how I would put that. And so, yeah. So I saw it in 1997 on this smaller scale. I've seen it, other times, whether it's been weather events, whether we were all trying to navigate COVID and how do we do that. But those have been sort of examples where I'm like, oh man, like, look what communities do. Like, look what the city does in terms of services, and then look what your community does as well. So,
Well, I always say that a city does two things. It has this underground infrastructure, which is all the services it provides, from
Mm-hmm.
emergency to water, sewer, trash, et cetera, et cetera. And then it has the above ground that really brings the soul of the community together. It's parks, it's right, the economic development that brings in the Albertsons, the library, all the festivals, all these things that people don't, I think, really understand that their city is the impetus behind these things. And if we don't have those gatherings, and this is what one of the key reasons I have this podcast is because I'm very concerned, just as a human, that we're living very individualistic lives. And we forgot that the human reality is all about social connection. And we do much better when we are together. And I think cities are the heartbeat of that. And people don't know it. And like you said, it's there so that when there's tragedy, people respond because they're like, this is the neighborly, this is what we do. This is what we're Cedar Park. Cities have an identity too. And it's like, we can't, right? We gotta be Cedar Park. We gotta help. We gotta serve. Like you say, it used to be a volunteer fire department. And then it was like, I grew up in that, out in the middle of nowhere. So my dad, his brother, volunteer firefighters for forever. And so I love that you just said, as you're going through this, traumatic tornado experience, that you look and see the city manager is the calmest one in the room, and you're seeing that.
Oh yeah.
A part of your story next is you're going to become the assistant city manager in 2002. Was that this is the hat you're going to wear? Was that you're interested in city management? When did city management come on your radar to go like, maybe this is a role?
I would say that especially if, whoever's listening is like, oh, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Do I have an interest in this? As I mentioned earlier, I came into this world, into this city world, not really because I'm taking the next step to be a city manager, but really it was like, oh, I'm interested in this space called human resources. And this is providing me an opportunity to really grow myself there. What I've been fortunate, early in my career, like from the beginning when I came in, is that I worked for city managers who were at different parts of their career where mentoring was like, this is really important to me. And so I feel like I had really good mentors. I worked for 3 different city managers, a couple of interim city managers, because I would also say what happens in fast growth sometimes is a lot of change actually in that city manager role. You said a minute ago, it's like, oh yeah, the tenure can look short. I'm like, oh yeah, it really can. And when you are in a community that's also like transforming its identity, if you will, from I'm a small town, rural, I don't want to be part of Austin, to it's growing really fast, and you abut Austin and, all the things that means, your politics are changing. That oftentimes can mean changes in your city management. But I worked for city managers who were highly encouraging, who, again, I walked into a culture of, this is your job description, but man, we need all these other areas of help and assistance. And if you're willing to do that, raise your hand. And so it was sort of twofold in that space of being willing to hey, we need help, and having a leader who was willing to say that. And then again, sort of being on the receiving end of, oh yeah, and I'm willing to do that as well. And so I worked for city managers who were highly encouraging. I also worked for 3 city managers that had they left these, how do I say this nicely? They left these roles at the encouragement of the city council. And so, again, as a young professional during that time, I'm like, wow, that job looks sort of brutal on your way out. And so, I had some trepidation about, how does this work? I'd not been in environments where I'd really seen the political side of things. And so being in a city this size, being up close and more personal to the politics of it, I think is also a learning experience. And then having somebody, a more experienced professional who's like, here's how this really works, also helps give you some idea of how the politics works on top of here's operations and running an organization, and here's where those lines cross, and how sort of this marriage has to happen between those two things. And so really my interest when I became an assistant city manager is the city manager at the time had gone to had gone to the University of Virginia program, or he'd gone to ICMA. He'd seen a presentation about SEI and LEAD. And so he sent myself and our public works director, who also became an assistant city manager. And he was like, I want y'all go to learn about high performing organizations, the University of Virginia program. And that was actually like a really big, like, learning moment of, I'm outside of the city of Cedar Park. Here I'm exposed to all these other assistant city managers, other department heads of cities from across the nation. We're in this big learning environment about, high performing organizations. And so he called it the ice cream cone. He was like, you don't get to give up your current job as HR director, but I'm going to like put an extra scoop on top of your ice cream cone and like grow you as an assistant city manager. And so I was actually able to go into that role under that space of, you don't get to give up anything, but I'm going to help you grow into this larger job. And so really, I think the interest was, again, exposure to sort of this broader look of local government, other than just sort of the operations. But you're like, oh yeah, here are these other things that all have to go together in order for local government to work really well. And so that was my initial. And then I took on the interim city manager role. And again, if you're taking on an interim role, it means somebody has left. And that was, all of those were like personally like hard for me, because I had like professional relationships with the managers that I worked for and people that had helped grow me. And so, yeah.
So
I don't know if that answered your question.
It's so good. I just love, there's so many things. I mean, I could literally, this podcast, I got to be careful because it could be 3 hours long. There's so many good things. So I want to be mindful of your time. So you're in this role for 3 years. And like you said, again, a couple of things I just want to highlight again. You're in an organization that isn't demanding that you take more, but is giving you opportunities to raise your hand and say, hey, we have other hats. We do need help. And I think I hear it over and over by the most successful people that come on this podcast. They always say yes, raise your hand, because those are
absolutely.
Yeah, they're going to build you. They're going to stretch you. Don't stay in your comfort. I think that's one of the things young people, especially today, I get concerned. We kind of want a comfortable life. Comfortable will not prepare you. If you want to lead and have a life of impact, you got to get out of your comfort. You're doing that. And at the same time, I think what's rewarded and encouraged current city managers, you had people that mentored you. They didn't just give you more hats to wear and then leave you out on an island. And I think that's the beautiful thing in local government. There's such a community of service. I think one of the things in the private sector is there's so much cutthroat, kind of like everyone's out for their own. In the public sector, I see more of a camaraderie. Like, we are trying to do this for the betterment of the city. There's more shared ideas. There's less like competition, either internally or even, especially city to city. If you're a public works director and you're looking for ideas, maybe you're young in HR, call the city next to you. Be a part of these. We'll get into at the end, the Texas City Management Association, the ICMA. There's all kinds of organizations for every department under the sun for you to build community and network. And I think I love that about public sector, especially local government. You become the city manager in light of watching a number of city managers be exited out the door. It's not like they're being exited out.
And
yet
why do you do that?
You choose to say yes, Now, here's what's great.
Yes.
You choose to say yes in 2005 after a series of people have walked through the door, and yet you have been in this role now for 21 years. And it's not like it stopped growing. We're talking about when you take over again in 2000, it's 26,000. By 2010, it's 49,000. It'll doubled in size. It's like you had said, it's one of the fourth fastest growing city. It's going to double in size again, almost, to 77,000 by 2020. We're talking about big things. The opening of the Cedar Park Center. It's now, I think, the HEB Center. We're talking about the medical center that opens, I think, the 2 years after the Cedar Park Regional Medical Center. These are huge things that local gov has so many fingers in the pot of to make sure that they grow and are happen and right. And so talk about, as you get in that role, maybe even as you say yes to the role, I'm sure there was trepidation because you had seen all these people. Yes. Were you thinking like, okay, well, maybe this is a couple years and then I'll have to be shown the door? And like, what were you thinking as you took that role?
Well, the night that I was appointed, I mean, that's such a bittersweet, for me, it's like a really bittersweet night, because what that also means is that they've exited the manager that I've been working for and have a lot of respect for. And actually I'm approaching it at that point as, oh, you've appointed me as interim. We're in the middle of the budget process. There's been a lot of political, and I will say chaos at that point. There'd been a lot of political chaos during that time. The organization was like, when you have a lot of political chaos, like the organization feels that too. And so I really did approach like, oh, you need an interim who knows the organization, who like knows, the people involved. And I thought, okay, and we're in the middle of budget. So I thought, absolutely, like I will go into this. I'll serve as your interim. I love the organization. I've been there for a while now. So yeah, I have a lot of blood, sweat, tears, investment, et cetera, as it relates to people that work for us, the organization itself. And so that, so looking at it through that lens of absolutely, I will help serve in this interim role while you go hire somebody to do this job. My kids are like 4 and 1 at the time. So I have young kids at home. And yeah, that was, really how I went into it is I'll absolutely help on this interim basis while y'all go recruit somebody to do this city manager job. I have a busy personal life, but to your point, I'm like, yeah, here I am 21 years later. So it didn't quite work like that. And I would say it didn't work like that for a few reasons. For me personally, I went from the interim role into the city manager role probably about 6 months later or so. So at about 6 months, but I knew a lot of the council. We had council members who had left, who had just returned. And so I had relationships there. I'd say they were people that I trusted, I had a lot of respect for. And it was a very sort of significant like pinpoint of, oh yeah, we're going to make a transition right now. Politically as a city, growth, et cetera. And so there really was like this additional to me, what felt like a very distinct transitional point. But to your point, I didn't come into the city manager job with 20 years of city management experience with someone else. And so for me, I think the two things that made the absolute difference that I like, I wouldn't be here today, 21 years later. One was the council itself. and sort of I think it was sort of how they decided they were going to approach this transition. And it felt very, we're going to do this together. Like, we're going to do this with you and this city team, this department head, this city leadership team. And we're going to make this transition together. And I don't know that every new city manager gets to walk into that space that has that feel. So, I think I'm the good fortune of time and location and people and situation and, these things that you don't necessarily get to put in a, job advertisement, but that really is what it was. And then secondarily was sort of the support of the organization, particularly the leadership that was in the organization as we were making this transition. I know you are not an engineer and you don't come from that background, but I'm going to help. I'm going to help you every way I can, help educate you, help support you, help you be ready for meetings and things like that. So I'm that initial, first couple of years were really critical. And like I said, I think I had this really good fortune of having those things that help support, my success 21 years later. So, yeah.
It is interesting that, like you say, you have you mentioned even early on, you've grown up in this area. So you have this vibe. You come into Cedar Park at such an early stage. You go through tragedy with a tornado a year. You have these kind of moments where, again, you're building these relationships. And I think there's all kinds of different scenarios and reasons why you should hire within, without. But I do think, especially like you said, in an organization that is sprinting a marathon and that's gone through so many leaders and just needs some stability and needs some, like you said, we got to do this together. This isn't no city manager's going to solve this. No elected's going to solve this. We all got to work together to figure out how to keep, this city flourishing instead of in chaos. And it just seems like that perfect time. Now, I will say that makes sense on paper and in my mind. For 5 years, 10 years, you've lasted 21 years. So obviously you have weathered different councils. You've weathered different, even the Cedar Park Center, now the HEB Center. I'm sure that project had these kind of projects on these kind of scales, get all kinds of people who get pissy and all kinds of people who are the biggest fans and all people. You have someone has to take the drama of that, and usually it's the city manager because no one else wants it. You're the lightning rod. How have you, looking back, what do you think are the keys to success for a city manager lasting? Is it communication? Is it that prioritization of the comprehensive plan? Is it the ability to listen? How have you been able to withstand some of I'm sure there's failures, there's wins, there's all kinds of things that you've had to weather during that season, especially
a lot of lessons learned.
And it's not like the city's just kind of been existing. It's still been in rapid growth mode for a while now. So what do you think specifically for that role, which is such a unique role because it works with the electeds and the residents and the staff? What do you think are some keys to the success?
And again, I get to say a lot of this in retrospect. I don't know that I knew during the moments and during the time, but I definitely have a respect that, man, every community is different. It works differently. It vibes differently. It prioritizes differently. And even as your city is growing, some of those things, are going to change in your own city. And so having having recognition of hey, here are the things that are important here. And again, if you're in the same place for a while, It's like, is this changing? How is this changing? What's this going to mean? What's it going to mean from how you respond as a city? One of the things that's changed for Cedar Park is not just growth, but it's sort of the demographics of growth. Like when you look at our demographics from 20 years ago, our senior population was like, I think it was so small. Well, now you look at one of our highest, growing demographics happens to be in the senior population piece. So it's like, oh, well, guess what? We don't have a lot of senior programming. Well, what do we need to be doing? And so, and it'd be great if like, oh, I, the city manager, can see all this and I understand. Well, that's not how it works. The way it works is that you work with really good people, your council's in touch with your community, and like, all of you together are like, hey, like what's happening here? And do we need to respond to these things? And so for me, again, initially, I come from a human resources background. And that piece of how relationships work, and how they sort of best work, and when they're not working, what can you do? I think that has always been really important to me. And so how that has worked with individual council members and or like the council as a whole, I think has been something that has remained, absolute priority. On the flip of that is really how is that working again within your organization and within your leadership, and trying to find those ways to where it doesn't necessarily feel like council's on one side and staff is on the other. I find that to like not be a great long-term way to be able to provide services, all the things, and feel like, oh yeah, we're all rowing in the same direction. And so finding those opportunities to feel like, oh yeah, we're all like, we all sort of get where we're going. And my experience has been like and I don't know if this has been, again, time, place, location, fortune, whatever it is, like the respect for like our council has had what I've experienced is like, oh, the experts in our organization, whether it's, utility planning to, capital improvement projects, whatever it's been, man, it's so nice to hear the appreciation from our council for our staff up, down, across, whether it's the 4th of July event to, whatever other types of programming or just service that we're providing. I don't know that I've been in a council meeting over the last 20 years, and I don't think I exaggerate this, where at some point during that meeting, there's not a compliment or a comment of appreciation for our staff. And so, how does that work over 20 years? Like I said, I don't know that I have the magic key for that. I will say, like, trying to, where I have opportunities for this to feel more like we're all rowing in the same direction, has been helpful, and I think makes everybody enjoy what they're doing a whole lot more. I think the other piece is, and I don't know, I don't know that this has been my role particularly, but it's certainly something that I've appreciated most out of this, because you talk about fast growth, fast growth, fast growth. I'm like, yep, that's operations, 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 run, 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 run. And so when people say like, what have you loved most? I'm like, yeah, I can name big projects. In HEB Center, I'm like, it was a big project. And for Cedar Park, it was the most significant thing, it was the most significant like amenity we had built to date. Today I look at, you mentioned the library. I'm like, oh yeah, that's part of a bigger vision that's related to actually having a downtown and actually having this gathering spot. But along the way, I think what I've appreciated are sort of the soft side of that, which has been, oh, yes, we have built a community from the standpoint of we've built a lot of roads, we've put a lot of pipes in, we've built fire stations, we've built, police departments, we've developed parks, actual green space, we're doing trails. But like, it's when you go to something and it's usually sort of some sort of event and you actually sort of watch what people are doing and how they're engaging. And whether it was, I can remember the first time we did a Santa's workshop and lit a tree and there were, 30 people there. And I'm like, oh, that's several thousand people there. So I was like, oh yeah, we built a city, but we also got to be part of building a community. And that to me is been really, those are different. So those have been, both sides of it, I guess.
Well, it seems like the common theme for your success and the team's success and the community's success is that you have your pulse on the people. After 350 podcast episodes now and hearing a lot of different stories, it reminds me of Jennifer Poirier is city manager in Clearwater, Florida, and she was HR as well. And it just seems like HR people who do HR really well. There's the HR people that are obsessed with rules, and then there's the HR people that really love people. And I'm sure there's a pendulum swing on that. And I don't think one's worse than the other. I just think that there's a unique, the ones who love people oftentimes end up as city managers. It's very interesting. And I think that there is a difference. I think the city manager has a temptation to have their pulse on projects. And then when the project fails or the project succeeds, they put all their success in that. It seems like, again, your legacy, this length of tenure, is because your pulse is on people, whether that's the electeds, the residents, the staff. And when your pulse is on people, a project can change. You can redevelop your downtown. You're not as sold on the project's got to get done. It's more like, how are the people? How are we in communication? Do we all know, like you've said multiple times, do we know where we're rowing? That kind of boat can shift. And I think in political things like a city, if you're too tied to the project and not the people, then all of a sudden that boat can't shift with budgets, with COVID, et cetera. And so just to encourage people, is your pulse on the project or is it on the people? How well do you know what's going on in your organization with your electeds, I love that too, that your electeds are more or less, it seems like maybe there's less, I got elected for this one thing. Instead, it's more like they seem to know the role of the elected is to be the voice of the people, to have the pulse on the people around them, to go, hey, this is what we see that, I've noticed that we don't really have senior stuff. Maybe we should look at that. What are we going to do? That allows you to be responsive to real things that are happening. I think that's such a great, gosh, I could talk to you for so long. I want to have you back on because I do think that with that much growth, you've probably had to redevelop the downtown, not only physically, but also culturally. Like, as a town changes with that many people, I'm sure, who are we? What's our identity? I think there's some change there I'd love to dive into. Let's end with this. I want to talk because you've been, obviously you have numerous awards, Central Texas Public Administrator of the Year, the ICMA 2016 Award for Career Development. I'm sure your plethora of awards would, cover my wall. I want to talk about the associations, Texas Management, City Management Association, the Texas Municipal League, the ICMA. What has it meant in a position, in a role specifically like city management, that you're the only one in Cedar Park? Now, sure, you can go down to Austin. I think is it TC now? It is down there. Maybe you hang out with TC. Maybe you go over to what's the what did you say is next to you? Rock Hill? No, wrong.
Round Rock.
Round Rock, right? Maybe you gotta get together maybe regionally for a luncheon from time to time, but it's not like you just go down to a Chamber of Commerce meeting and can commiserate and or go to, like, you have to be really intentional. And like you said, you've been running, you've been sprinting, you have, it's not like you have bored moments. Like, you have so much to strategize about the future of a city, as well as deal with the present issues that it's being faced with. You have to be very intentional about network, about your own personal health, your own personal well-being. What is it? What are these associations? What are these networks? How would you encourage someone who's coming into local government who goes, I just don't have the time for it? What would you say to them?
So I'd say a couple of things. You know how when people ask you, particularly when you're talking, either to a class or some group of young professionals, and it's like, what's your top 5 things or what's your top 10 things? I'm like, oh yeah, sort of I've got like a few. Some of the first ones is like, hey, you should know yourself first as best you can. Like, where you're good, where like, that's sort of not my thing. But the second one is really like, grow your network. And I will say, I don't know that I had enough, I didn't have an appreciation of that early in my career at all. And even when I first came into the city manager role, when somebody was like, hey, and I had just gotten involved in like TCMA, but candidly, I was like, oh, well, I don't want to call somebody else and, admit I'm having problems, or I don't want to tell them something embarrassing about Cedar Park. Like, that was really hard for me to sort of figure out, like, how it's okay. And like, we've all been there, and whatever you're going to tell me, I can probably like tell you something that I did worse or, had a greater mistake. But I really didn't understand that early. And I will tell you, like, where I learned it was not up, but from down. We had an assistant too who had gone to KU, right? Who has an insane network. And I remember like, oh, I'd give her a project. It was a Catherine, who of course now is a city manager. And so she'd do a project, and then she'd be like, I talked to these like 15 people from 15 other cities. And I was like, what? But so truly, I think I got my best appreciation of understanding how incredibly valuable like this peer network could be, actually, from, somebody who had worked for our city for a couple of years, was a newer graduate out at KU. And I was like, that's amazing. And to this day, I'm like, she's one of the best networkers that I know. And I say that from all of the value that you get from networking. And not only is it about like your own mental health, or like, hey, I'm like, what's happening in Meet and Confer in the region? Like, can we just sort of have an understanding of what we're all going to look like? Who's gone through single source trash for commercial? And so really having somebody else's experience, and there's so much trust in that group. And again, I didn't walk into it like having an understanding of what a value that is. So on that like quick sort of mentor level or network level. And then I think secondarily, you mentioned earlier, like, oh yeah, you've got city managers in your region. I'm like, man, that network, and we are all very intentional, both the city managers and our assistant city managers, of knowing one another. I don't hesitate 5 seconds to pick up the phone and call. And it's because we've been intentional about developing those relationships. And again, how valuable that is, of somebody else's perspective, insight, experience. Watch out for, did you think about? And so from that, when we think about the associations, TCMA, ICMA, it's for sure that at this exponential level, if you will, in terms of opportunities to learn. For sure, as somebody is, who's earlier in their career or looking for that next step or looking, is this the right place for me? I'm like, oh, the people that you meet in the associations who, gosh, maybe they don't have, they don't have a position, but they know somebody who knows somebody. And again, sort of that connection from a, a professional perspective, a job perspective. And again, secondarily, that how do I learn somebody else's perspective, somebody else's experience? And then, of course, like sort of this expert area of whether it's a conference, a presentation, et cetera, and then being able like, oh, that's so relevant to me. I'm going to follow up with that expert later on. And so, and of course, then you take it to the ICMA level. And again, it's sort of like exponentiated again. And so, yeah, so I feel like the value has been the people value, the experience value, the perspective value, the, potential professional job value, and then support value. So
So
yeah.
good. I love it. Oh,
I think that's a really long answer to your question.
so many good things. I have kept you long over an hour, and just thank you so much. No, it's it's such a great story, right? There's so much to unpack, and that's what's so fascinating about not only the journey of someone who had no idea really of local government or the opportunities, who's now been a city manager, not only of a city for 2 decades, but in a city of just incredible impact. Like Cedar Park would not be the city it is today if it didn't have your leadership. And so how amazing is that? What a legacy, what impact. And you're still rocking it. You're like 32. Like, I don't know how you stay so. What is the secret? I always say work-life balance is BS. There's no such thing as balance. There's just intention. You must be drinking out of the fountain of youth. I don't understand. What does Brenda do? Are you did I hear you were a runner? Like, what do you do to just recharge and relax in such a demanding role?
I did actually did like run for a couple of decades. And so now I'm at this space and I'm like, oh, I prefer the trails. I prefer trails and hiking to like the pound of the pavement, which, like I said, I did for a couple of decades and a couple marathons. And I was like, that's been great. I am like hitting a trail that looks a little different now. I love the beach. It's like my favorite sound spot, the water, the sound, the waves. Yeah. I'm a big reader, and you're shocked to know I'm like, I like to be around, like, I hang out with my friends and family. I'm like, again, I grew up in this area. My best friends I've had since I was in 2nd grade, and those are still like incredibly important people to me. I love to travel. So the travel side of that, scratches that itch of learning and, seeing new things, meeting new people, getting to nerd out on somebody else's city.
I love it. Oh, it's so good. Well, I hope to find my way down to Texas this next year.
I hope you do.
HaltingWinter tour. We're definitely going to stop at Cedar Park.
I can't wait. I would love to show you around. You really will go. The library is like incredible. Just watching other people use it, you're just like, this is amazing. So,
and from a little article I read, it's just had a ton of people. Like they said, so many people have come through. It'd be like every resident of Cedar Park coming through like 4 times. So, which is amazing.
I think it's more than that.
I'm sure it's even more, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where I really want to do a series on these incredible spaces. How do we, because some people could go, like you even said, like I think the figure I saw was 31. You said it's a lot more than that. We can go, oh, well, the city, why is it spending this money? You don't realize, like, we need these spaces. We need community spaces, not only for people to learn, like libraries, and have those resources, but the community it's used for, I'm sure, thousands of things where people are, like you have that, the HEB Center. And you guys have an American Hockey League team, the Texas Stars. You have an NBA G League, the Austin Spurs. And people go, oh, how cool, right? There's a center. We can go in concerts and all these things. And that's great. Stars get to perform there. In a library, people become stars. They get to lead workshops. They get to host, book clubs. They get to find their own selves, people that will never be known on any national platform or probably even city platform. And yet they're these people that get to practice their skills. And people don't realize these are the places that cities, these libraries, these unique community events, that give us the soul and the power of life together. So, we got to have you on and do it again. Brenda, thank you so much.
And add to your list, we're opening up a facility called Recreate. I call it Recreate. It's sort of like Recreate, but it is our old library facility that we've repurposed. And it's I would tell you, sort of multi-generational community programming, wellness, learning, etc. And so, so we're ribbon cutting that on Friday. So I'm super excited to see, from a community, again, an additional community gathering space. Our senior group in the community is very excited about how they're getting to expand some programming into that space as well. So, come to Texas. Come see us.
We're coming down. We're bringing the crew down. We're going to it's going to be great. Oh, Brenda, thank you so much for sharing your life, your leadership journey, your insights. Man, what a privilege. What a pleasure it's been.
Well, I appreciate your time as well. And then, like I said, come see us. I'd love to show you around.
We will. We'll make it happen.
Awesome.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter Podcast remind us where government really lives, locally. Right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.